unless there's a change, and then we'll let you know what that change is. And while I'm here, just to co-moderator for today's event, I am Kathy Strohmeyer Golden. I've served as the Provost, Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs here at the university. You have a program. We will not read the program, but we will follow the program as printed unless there's a change, and then we'll let you know what that change is. And while I'm here, just to save some time, I would like to welcome you to the 8th Annual B.B. King Day Symposium. I welcome you on behalf of the President, Dr. Jerryl Briggs. In his absence, he could not be here today. I welcome you on behalf of the entire university family, and I invite you to become a part of this family. So that means a lot of things, and if you want to know what it means, see me offline, and I'll tell you what's involved in becoming a member of the Mississippi Valley State University family. At this time, I will yield the mic to Dr. Alfonso Sanders.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and I too am, privileged in welcoming you to this 8th annual event. Back in 2015, when B.B. King passed, I approached Robert Jerryl with a concept, an idea. I went to Dr. Golden at that time. She was serving a different capacity for the university, but we talked about at least solidifying something that represented such a great and I would say a great and powerful voice that we had lost, among us, and especially representing the Mississippi Delta area. And I'd grown to know B.B. King over the years, in certain capacities through the educational resources that we were providing here at Mississippi Valley State. And he was always very generous with his time and often with his finances and resources to help the university in many ways. So I thought we would be remiss not to have something dedicated to his honor, and so therefore the idea of the B.B. King Day Symposium arose. And I'm very fortunate to still be here, being a part of it. I feel very, very grateful that the university is continuing to do this, and I hope that we have many more in the future, and I hope it starts to become something that not only recognized among us, but also a part of the universe, as to say, because we now know that there's a serious national and international interest that is constantly growing, in the history of the blues. So we have a great guest of panelists and also some of the musicians who are in town. And tonight, of course, if you see your program, we will be at the B.B. King Museum at 7 o'clock tonight, and it's open to the public, and we'll have a lot of music going on tonight, so you don't want to miss that. But without further ado, I'd like the panelists to come forth, and we will be, well, I guess that Robert Jerryl is going to come up, and he's going to give us a moment of silence and explain to what he's doing. But in the meantime, I would like Tina Tucker to come forth. And I'd like to have the panelists, Hermon Johnson and Johnny B. Thomas, to come to the panel for that, to start their discussion. Mr. Robert Jerryl, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Sanders. He's a very talkative individual. I love him, I love him dearly. He's my close brother, and I just want you to know. So again, yeah, in 2015, we did start talking about this as soon as BB passed away, doing an event to kind of honor him. And so here we are 8 years later. Amongst those, we had a lot of people who participated in this event, starting from the inception of it, that are no longer here. So what I want to do is call out some names of the people who were here, and let's give a moment of silence for them, okay? Otis Clay, attended the very first one. Denise LaSalle, Big George Brock, Eddie the Chief Clearwater out of Chicago, Big Daddy Reuben Hughes, WGNL radio station here in Greenwood. Stanley Abernathy was BB's trumpet player for many years, after coming over from Bobby Blue Bland. Ben Wiley Payton, one of the greatest acoustic players you could find on this planet. Scrap Iron, Frank Robertson. Everybody called him Scrap Iron, so I say that first. But Frank Robertson is his given name. Scrap Iron was a road manager for Little Milton for a lot of years, and I tell you, he had been hosting events all over the world, and especially on the blues cruise. We lost him. Booker Walker was also a guy who played with BB in his early days. And I can't leave out my cousin, Melvin Housecat Hendricks. Was the piano player for many of the old greats, and the sister, and the music director for his sister, Dorothy Moore. Willie Cobbs, you guys remember Willie Cobbs, 89-year-old blues man out of Arkansas, Greenwood, Mississippi, passed away at 89 just a couple of years ago, so we're missing him. And just recently, we lost one of the gentlemen who had been to each one of these events that we started. His name is Walter Riley King. That's BB's nephew. He played with BB for a number of years, was also the music director and arranger for BB for a number of years. So let's give a moment of silence for all those guys that we call out. Thank you. Miss Tina Tucker.
I'm always the shortest one in the room. If you turn to your page in your pamphlet to page 6, we're going to do 2 verses of Lift Every Voice and Sing, and everybody can sing along with me. You might want to stand up and let's sing this. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicings rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past have taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the presence has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over the way that the tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughter. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, while the white gleam of our bright star is cast. Thank you.
So I didn't tell the truth. Our first panel is entitled Unsung Stories, the Making of Civil Rights Leaders. Our panelists are Mr. Hermon Johnson and Mayor Johnny B. Thomas. They will tell you what they want you to know about themselves, but you can also see their bios in the program. And we're going to ask you, since we are late, to maybe take 10, 15 minutes each.
10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. You got it. Go ahead. Go be the stuff. Okay, see, this is about civil rights. Blues, right? You want to talk about blues and civil rights. Okay. All right. All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Hermon Johnson, Jr. I'm from Mound Bayou, Mississippi, born and raised there. And I don't know how many of you know about Mound Bayou. We've opened a museum there, and because we wanted to capture the history of this great town. And first of all, I want to thank everyone thank the people here who are having this symposium for inviting me here to be on this panel. I was in California for a long time, from '77 to 2020. I went there as a musician. I played behind some of these in the band that I was in before I left here. I played behind some of these blues artists. We played behind, Little Milton, Bobby Bland, and Willie Cobb, and also Tyrone Davis. We did a lot of music around here with them. But I went to California, and I had the burden of the town that I'm from because I started realizing the history of the town was not known. A lot of people around the country do not know about Mound Bayou, and I think it's a tragedy because the fact that this city was, the way it started, was so tremendous that in this state, the state of Mississippi, which has the history of being one of the most racist, inhospitable states in the country, but Mound Bayou became an oasis in this state. It had the very first manufacturing venture for any black in the country started in Mound Bayou. The very first hospital that blacks could go to in the northern part of the state of Mississippi was in Mound Bayou. There was over 147,000 kids born in that hospital. It became the very first HMO in the country. And one of the people who were there, there's a lot more that I can go into about Mound Bayou. I only have a limited amount of time. I can talk a lot. But one of the people that I want to key in on that his name was T.R.M. Howard. He ended up being the chief surgeon of the hospital there in Mound Bayou. And when he came in from Kentucky somewhere, he was from Kentucky, he had got his degree in different places. He has gone over to California, and then he ended up being the chief surgeon of the hospital in Mound Bayou. But he was passionate about civil rights. He didn't put up with any foolishness from the Mississippi, all the things that were going on in Mississippi, people being lynched, people being, their rights being violated every day, all the time. But him being in this enclave in Mound Bayou, where it was like an oasis, where black people ran everything. So he was pretty safe in town, but outside of town, you're still in the state of Mississippi. Anyway, all the injustices that were going on in the state, this guy was getting. He had national attention, and he would go around the country bringing attention to the injustices that was happening in Mississippi. But he mentored a guy that he had. Well, let me say this. T.R.M. Howard was a big businessman. Along with being the chief surgeon of the hospital, this guy was also, like I said, he was a big businessman. He would go safari hunting. He would go around the country doing hunting, and then go to Africa doing hunting. And back in the days, in the early 50s, that was a big deal. But he, and also, let me mention a couple of things. He also started opened the first Olympic-sized swimming pool that black could swim in the state of Mississippi. He also started a zoo in Mound Bayou. But one of the things that he had was an insurance company called Magnolia Mutual Life, and in that insurance company was a man that worked there, was Medgar Evers. And Medgar Evers had come there, he was working there, but he got mentored by T.R.M. Howard. And he mentored him until Medgar was able to go out and take over the NAACP. But he also mentored Fannie Lou Hamer, which is right over there in Drew, which is only 23 miles from Mound Bayou. He mentored Amzie Moore, because Amzie Moore was the guy who started the boycotting these service stations where you couldn't use the restroom. He mentored him. He mentored Charles Evers. And then they called him over at the killing of Emmett Till. He got really involved in that. Matter of fact, you probably would not know about Emmett Till, about Emmett Till, if it had not been for T.R.M. Howard. T.R.M. Howard called the man when they were about to bury Emmett Till in Mississippi. You probably saw parts of that on the story, the stories that they write about it, and they do parts of it. But they were about to bury him, and T.R.M. Howard called because he had a lot of contacts around the country. So he called a man, the congressman in Michigan was named Charles Diggs, the only black congressman in the country at that time, I believe. And he called Charles Diggs. Charles Diggs called a guy called a friend of his in Indiana, which was the Attorney General. The Attorney General in Indiana called the Attorney General in Mississippi because he knew him. And the Attorney General in Mississippi called the sheriff here in Mississippi and told him, don't bury that boy. And but T.R.M. Howard, let me just say this also about him, that he was so passionate about it that they called him to go over to Martin Luther King's church. And he went over there in Montgomery, and he spoke at Martin Luther King's church. Martin Luther King was not a national figure at the time, but he was talking about T.R.M. Howard he was talking about Emmett Till at that church. And he was so passionate about it then that he raised that audience up, the level of the passion in that audience about Emmett Till. And one person that was in that audience was so moved by it that 4 days later is when she sat down on the bus, and that was Rosa Parks. Most people don't know that story, and that's why I like to have talk about, as far as civil rights. I think that most people attribute the Emmett Till story and the Montgomery bus boycott as the beginning of the modern civil rights movement. But a lot of people don't know that that story behind the story was T.R.M. Howard and how he motivated a lot of people. And I think we need to uplift people like that. So anyway, I run a museum in Mount Bayou. We started a museum 2 years ago. I'm not sorry, a year ago. Mount Bayou Museum, the website is mountbayoumuseum.com. I invite everybody to come by there. We have a tremendous exhibits. We've been blessed with tremendous exhibits at this museum. That Women of the Movement series that was earlier this year in January on ABC. It's now running on Hulu. But that Women of the Movement series, I got a call late last year from somebody who knew somebody else, who called me and says, she says, how would you like to have the set props from that movie? And I'm thinking, okay, all right. And so I said, well, of course. And they called back and they worked it out. And so next thing I know, we had to go to Nashville and get all these set props. So we have exhibits on the Emmett Till story from this set props from the Women of the Movement series, which has opened up the door for us in a lot of different areas. Can't go into it now, but like I said, I invite everybody to come to the Mount Bayou Museum. The best thing to do is go on the site and find the phone number there. It's on the site, and give a call, because we don't have a big staff. And actually, we had to use our money to put it up. So we don't have a staff at all, basically. And just call the number, and if I'm in town, I'll come by and give a personal tour. And so with that, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Johnny B. Thomas, mayor of the town of Glendora, and looking at this young crowd, longer than most of you been here. Since 1982, 40 years as mayor, long time. Again, I'd like to thank the symposium organizers, Dr. Golden, who we go back quite a ways, on back to probably the inception of the Emmett Till Historic Intrepid Center in Glendora, Mississippi. Again, I'm the mayor of the town of Glendora for 40 plus years. Now, actually, the first African-American elected to any public office in the 1833 county of Tallahatchie County. And I'm currently serving as mayor of the oldest community or incorporated area of Tallahatchie County, a county and city that's 122 years old. We was only 6 years old when we had our first lynching. The town of Glendora had lynching of 2 individuals when we was just 6 years old. As infants, we began to follow an effort that had just started 2 years before we was incorporated, a bill that was submitted to the President of the United States to pass an anti-lynching bill. We recently had an opportunity 124 years later to attend that anti-lynching bill signing at the White House. 122 years for Glendora and 116 years for its first lynching. Anyway, we'll say that in our community, we began the Emmett Till Museum. We are the first and the only museum honoring the legacy of Emmett Till. We're 17 years old. We're the only one in the world. Some say the spirit of Emmett stayed close to home. Some say it even might have gotten into me with my association. 50 years, I hear from my mom. 50 years, I hear from my midwife, today is the scariest day in the history of my 122-year-old community. And I say that because today is the first day after finding a kid that have been missing for 3 days. Again, this kid turns up in Glendora. Why Glendora? Privileged community, had to be. And we'll show that. We won't do a whole lot of talking. We brought our history with us. We brought information regarding our museum. We brought our masterpiece of our museum, and we're going to show that to you all. And if you have any questions regarding it, we'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you. And can we show the
You're going to
show the film? The gentleman. He was scheduled to be here to show the film. Al, can you run it? Already going away yet. Said he's going to turn the light down some to get better.
Yeah, but I just laugh because I kept him in trouble all the time.
You kept Emmett Till.
I kept him in trouble all the time because I would start stuff and run home. And he could do whatever he wanted to do, but nobody else was going to do it.
Okay.
He was my protector.
At the store, we had picked cotton all day. We arrived around dusk dark. Maurice parked the car across, that would be to the north of the store. Wheeler, we all got out of the car. Wheeler went in the store first.
I went in the store, and then he came in. When he came in, I remember being alarmed, but I left him in there, you know, because you can't control Emmett. You don't tell Emmett what to do. I was about to try it anyway. So not thinking that it's going to come to where they came to, but I remember being alarmed when he came in. So my Uncle Simeon, who's 12, came in behind me. Yeah.
And at this point, Maurice didn't want Emmett in the store by himself because he was afraid that he wouldn't, you know, do the right thing. So he sent me in behind him. So Emmett was in the store with Calvin Bryant for about a minute, alone. Then I came in the store.
Alone?
The things that Calvin said, number one, she said, I came in the store and drug him out of there. That's not true. Emmett paid for his item. We both left the store at the same time. And we were standing outside of the store there, and Calvin Bryant came out behind us. And as she was walking towards us, our car, Emmett whistled at her. It scared us half to death.
Even today, we don't know why in the world he did that.
We couldn't get to the car fast enough. And Emmett saw our reaction, it scared him. So we got in our car and we got out of town. Maurice drove about 2 miles down the little gravel road. He saw a vehicle in our rearview mirror. He stopped the car. They all jumped out of the car, ran down through the cotton field. And I stayed in the car. Figured I could hide in the back seat. But it wasn't Callan's husband. It was one of our neighbors going home. But what happened when they got back to the car, Emmett begged us not to tell Daddy what happened because we was having so much fun, and he didn't want to go home. He thought Daddy would send him home for that.
About 9, it's almost dark.
Yeah.
And so we regrouped at the edge of the road, and that's when I remember those cotton bolls were not all the way out.
Right.
And you ever run through a cotton field when the cotton boll's not all the way out? Man, they'd be beating you, beating your legs. We'd fall over each other. Oh, man, it was a riot. And Emmett, when we got back to the edge of the road, he begged us not to tell my grandfather.
Okay.
And there was a girl there called Ruth. She said, look, I know these people. I said, you're going to hear some more. She told us plainly, said, this is not over. I know these people, what they've done to people. You're going to hear some more about this.
And we just kept silent, and after 2 days, 3 days, we forgot about it.
It was a big house, big landowner's house. They always call it a shack, but it was a big house, 4-bedroom. And those bedrooms, you didn't go through no hallway to get to them. You go through a bedroom to get to it. I don't know if you've ever been in a house like that down south there.
Yeah.
No wasted space. You swoop, swoop, you right into the next room. So my grandfather's, there's a big porch all the way across. My grandfather's on the left-hand side, and I was on the right-hand side. So the room right behind my grandfather, Simeon and Emmett Till was there.
Emmett was kidnapped out of my bedroom. He and I were sharing a bed. In my room, there was 2 beds. And after we had gone to bed, which was about 1 o'clock, I heard this noise, coming from the other room. And then when I opened my eyes, I saw Roy Bryant and J.W. Mylan standing at the foot of my bed. Mylan had a .45 in his hand, flashlight. He ordered me to lay back down and made Emmett get up and put his clothes on.
And I don't know what all was going on, but it was terror, man, pure terror. Yeah. They wanted him to get up, and he don't know none of his training. If they taught him, he ain't saying yes, sir. He's not saying no, sir. And they mad already about him whistling at this woman. And man, they were furious. He wanted to put his socks on. It was hell in that house, man. It was. I mean, you don't want to experience nothing like that. Yeah. The fear and the terror that we experienced.
They threatened to whip him in the house because he was saying yeah and no. He wasn't saying yes sir and no sir to them. But they claimed they were just going to take him up the road and whip him and bring him back. They said, if he's a wrong boy, we're going to bring him back.
So they finally got him out. My grandmother tried to pay him. They wouldn't hear that. And then after that, they left with him. And then my grandfather and grandmother leave.
It was, my mother, number one, she was so scared and hysterical, she just didn't know what to do. I mean, here her nephew she was in charge of keeping him safe. Now he was kidnapped by these men, and she was so hysterical, my dad had to take her out of the house because she told my dad, I can't stay here another night. So she left. My dad took her to Sumner, where my Uncle Crosby lived, and she never set foot back in the house. She left Sumner and went to Chicago. And now I'm the only one left, Wheeler and I, that is awoke. And Wheeler didn't say anything, I didn't say anything. I laid in that bed waiting for them to bring Emmett back, but it never happened.
So they didn't come back, and it seemed like daytime would never come. It was just dark forever, looked like, because all this is happening, it's just dark, dark. You feel better when the daylight started coming. So daytime came, and Curtis, he was graduated from Crane High School. Anyway, he called his mother, and then she called Emmett Till's mother. Then my mother called back and had my uncle, who just died in December. He's like 97, one of my dad's brother. So I can remember him coming over, and he got his pistol. You know, this is it. You got to be willing to die to do what you got to do. So my mother asked me to take me to my uncle that was 105, just died, took me up to his house, and I stayed up there and didn't sleep. I didn't sleep probably for 24 hours or more.
I heard this beating, this boy was beating and beating, and it's screaming, and I said, oh, what's going on here? So I'm going to mount out, I'm going to go up and tell Miss Mandy that Mountain and Brown up there beating somebody in that barn. So, and I told her, she said, well, come on back, let's go and see. Oh, we've been slow and nervy. Come on by and we'll see, can we see anything? When we got back up there, everything was quiet. Okay. Everything quiet, so that pickup truck, 1955, green pickup. And I'm gonna look up, Jerryl and Mylan came out. Nobody but him. And he came up there first. He walked up and this man and said, did you hear anything? She said, no, I didn't hear anything. And there's a well. And I'm going to get some water. I can see in my head, it's 45 on the side, had khaki pants on, green now, and that shit up. And he said, hey, you. And I said, yeah. He said, did you hear anything? Well, I said, no, I didn't hear anything, I said, I didn't hear anything. So, and after that, I had to go on the store, came on back, and I told my grandfather about it. And he said, look, so I'll tell you one thing. He said, you keep your mouth closed.
I was 6 years old, and my father worked on the railroad, but he also sold corn whiskey at the house. And on Saturday night or Friday night, when there was people in town, he would get up early that next morning to beat the other guy in Glendora that was selling corn whiskey from picking up the seal bottles, which the bottles they bought out of the store, and there was little nickel milk bottles. He would pay me a nickel a bottle And we go home and wash him out the pot, and he put his liquor in it. So we got up about 4:30 that morning and walked all the way to the north end of Glendora. And when we proceeded down there was nothing, nobody on the street. And on the way back to the 3 little blocks, whatever Glendora is, I would go between the stores and the garbage, picking up bottles and putting them in the bag with Daddy. And as we got about halfway back, we seen a pickup truck pull in front of J.W. Milan Station. It parked between the gas pump and the station door. And, you know, small space. And there was 2 black guys sitting. One of them was sitting in the bed of the truck with his feet over in the truck, and the other one was out leaning on the back end of the truck. And as we approached the truck, being a 6-year-old boy from the back, I remember standing behind the truck and see that GMC on the back of the truck. And there was blood dripping out of the tailgate of the truck onto the sidewalk. It was about the size of a 50-cent piece, but I was staring at that blood, and the green flies had started flying around. And J.W. Milan was in his service station at that time, and the door was open, and he came to the door of the service station, and he told one of the guys on the truck to go get Henry Lee Logan from his house, which was right down behind the Benelli Hall. And Daddy told him there was blood on the sidewalk. He said, "I killed a deer." And I could look at Henry Lee and all of them, and some was in distress, but I didn't know what it was. Daddy was in stress. And I don't know what he told Daddy when he said about deer season ain't in. Daddy said deer season ain't in. I don't know what J.W. told him. But I know when they got on the truck and proceeded down toward the gym, my father grabbed my wrist and started running home with me. There was a club called King Club right past J.W. place that had a row of hedges. And my father was taking me so fast and holding my wrist so tight, and I was too close to those hedges, and they were scratching the side of my face and scratching my shoulder, and I didn't know why he was pulling me like that. And we had a house, a shotgun house, 4 rooms straight back, about 5 feet off the ground. I remember he ran in the house, went up the porch. We didn't have a living room. Him and my mother were sleeping in the front room. They were sleeping. I remember him bending over the bed, whispering to Mama. And she had a distressed look on her face, and by that time he ran to the back door. From the back door, it was about 150 yards across there to the gym. We could see the truck pull up, and there was a shed at the end of the gym that they kept old equipment in. We seen the black guys get off of the truck, go in the gym and throw something silver looking over in the back of the truck. And the truck pulled off, Daddy went back to the front door. We could see the truck as it come back through Glendora going north then straight. And I don't know what I said to my father, but he slapped me and said, "If you said anything, then white folks would kill all of us."
My name is Henry Logan. I was supposed to have been involved with immaterial murder, but I wasn't. And I still can't figure out why they would have me involved in that. And I know nothing about it, no more what was told. This woman named Mary, she came up, she said, "Y'all heard about what happened last night?" I said, "No." And they said, "Yeah." I said, J.W. and them went over the monies and killed a boy and put him in the river. Put him in, well, it wasn't a river, it was Black Bow. So I said, "No, we ain't heard nothing about that." And so she said, said Too Tight said, "That shoe laying down," I said, that's a shoe that boy had on. So they went to this boy's grandparents and asked about him. Said, Dad said, his granddad said, "He's in there asleep." Said, "What's wrong with him?" Said, "Well, wake him up. We're going to get him out of there and take him and put him in the river down there." So he said, "No." Said, "No, white folks don't do that." Now, that's what they say, he said now. Said, "Don't do that." So if you let him stay in the morning, I'll put him on a bus and send him back to Chicago. So no. They said, no, we want him out of here now. And said, I don't lie, I think they said that one of them hit the old man, the boy's granddaddy. Said, I reckon he didn't want them to beat him up, either kill him. And they got him out of there. So, well, they said that the boy was fighting him, but he couldn't whoop him all. That's what they said. Now, I'm putting that in the beginning that they say. Now, if I'd have been there looking at it, it'd have been a different story. So, but why, I still can't say it. Can't figure out why well, they had me involved, and I know nothing about it.
I worked down at the store. The mama had a store, and they had she wasn't retarded. You call her Mongoloid's sister. And I'd go down there, and they'd pay me to go down there and keep her company. The mama would tell me. She told me to come and keep her company. Just talk to Marlon mama. And so I was down there that day, and we was playing a game in the store, and the telephone rang. Miss Marlon came out the kitchen and grabbed the phone, and she turned red as a peach. She said, "You did what? You did what?" And then she said, "What?" And then she said, she stood up there a while, and then she said, "Look, everybody be here. Come here. Everybody come here. I'll take care of the rest." She hung up the phone, she paid me, and she told me, "Don't come back, I'll call you." And she was trembling, and when I went to the door, she was back on that phone calling the sheriff. I told Dad, came home, I told Dad and Mama, I said, "Mama, Daddy, something has happened, and it's bad." Daddy said, "What do you think has happened?" I say, Miss Marlon got on that phone, she's turned red as a peach, her eyes got big, and she told everybody to come there. She said, talking about them boys, said, "Let me get in the road and see what's going on." That's who she telling to come there. And I said, when I got to the door, she paid me, and when I got to the door, she was calling the sheriff. He said, "Calling the sheriff?" So by the time Daddy got on, the sheriff passed. Well, it was just an army of cars, but about, I don't say an army, but about 3 or 4 cars coming by. And Daddy says big, so him and Cousin Hayden, they got together and they went on down. They said every mile and every Brown, everybody's down at that store. It looked like a association. And the next thing we heard later that Emmett Till had been killed.
From the back door, it was about 150 yards across there to the gym. We could see the truck pull up at that with a shed at the end of the gym that they kept old equipment in. We seen the black guys get off of the truck,
All right,
go in the gym and throw something silver looking over in the back.
we can cut,
The
okay.
truck pull up.
That concludes what we call our orientation at our museum. So now you have to come to Glendora to get the rest of the story. But let me just add that Sonny Boy Williamson, also having to do with the blues, was born in Glendora, Mississippi. He's one of those individuals that, like Robert Johnson, have 4 grave sites. Sonny Boy Williamson have 4 birthdays: 1898, 1905, 1912, or 1914. So he and I guess all of the blues fellows back then had 4 of everything. And of course he said he never said anything twice because it wasn't worth saying the first time. Anyway, I had the chance to meet him in 1965, leaving Europe. Came to Glendora, where I was working in a juke joint and had been working there 7 years at that time. At 12 years old, I had been working there since 7. And I got a chance to meet Sonny Boy. He came to Glendora. He played with us at his nephew's juke joint, and he was too poor to leave to go back to Helena, Arkansas. He had to be sent home. After leaving Europe with crowds, you couldn't move. And he came home broke. And right now, the Sonny Boy Williamson, as you know, doesn't have any children, but his estate belonged to a guru in Washington State, owns everything. And he has 50 nieces and nephews in Glendora. And hopefully we'll do the same as Robert Johnson did when he sued and went to the Supreme Court to get his father's legacy. We might have to do that for Sonny Boy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of history and a lot of things, maybe, and a lot of questions. So I'd like to open up now just an opportunity for anybody who has questions. There's a hand here. Yes, here's a mic right here, if you can get it too.
Doc Sanders, let me just mention one other thing. I'm also an author, co-author of A Stone of Hope, Rising Above Slavery, Jim Crow, and Poverty in Glendora, Mississippi. Right. And of course, you know, we got that name from Dr. Martin Luther King that will be coming up shortly, the 1963 speech. And that's where we come from with our book. And please read it and come to us and get your copy.
You're directed.
Good morning. My name is Karen Stallworth. I'm from Pritchard, Alabama. I heard the stories about the men in this war. James Meredith wanted to integrate the University of Mississippi. He had been an Air Force veteran. He saw with his own eyes that there was power against white supremacy when he was in Asia fighting in Vietnam. He survived all that and still came back to the United States and was shot down walking down the street in the United States. He was not allowed in the University of Mississippi. He tried to integrate the University of Mississippi. Medgar Evers. He got on television. He took a hell of a risk. He took a hell of a risk trying to warn the people of Mississippi about the war.
At this point, do you have a question?
The way he was murdered.
Excuse me.
Was that story. Y'all, this is a war. It's still going on. It's still going on.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to open it up for questions, and I know probably from an emotional standpoint, thank you so much that you're sharing a heartfelt story there. Any questions related to what we're dealing with here with the panelists? Yeah, I have one question I'd like to direct to Hermon Johnson Jr. here, is that in Mount Bayou, understanding the backdrop and the type of atmosphere was there, that, from what I understand, it was kind of a safe haven for many African-American people whenever trouble arose. So can you speak to Mount Bayou in terms of what that meant to some of the leadership that arose out of that?
Yeah, thanks. Well, if I can tell the story about how Mount Bayou started. I don't know how much time.
I just want to well, we don't have a lot more time left because we're going to get to the next panel. But I did want to understand what did it mean at that time, because if I understand correctly, the people who, even Emmett Till's mother had to have a place to be.
Exactly. And let me speak to that first. When Emmett Till's mother came down for the trial, she stayed. There was nowhere else in the Delta that she could have stayed that would have been safe for her, except Mount Bayou. And because Mount Bayou was an oasis in the, I guess, like I said before, it's an oasis in the desert. Because we had all black leadership, it was an all black town. It was very, very prosperous. Matter of fact, let me just say this part. When Mount Bayou started, there was a plantation down in Vicksburg, and they ended up coming from that plantation. The guys who were on that plantation, the men who were enslaved there, bought that plantation after they became emancipated. And they became the highest grossing, or they had the highest level of cotton in the world at that time when they came right out of slavery. They were very innovative, and they brought that innovation to Mount Bayou. And Mount Bayou became because they had that highest grade of cotton in the world, cotton ginning became a business in Mount Bayou. It had many cotton gins, more than a normal town that size. And it became prosperous, and but it also became a safe haven for else in the state of Mississippi or anywhere else and anywhere. If you made it to Mount Bayou, you were safe. And it became sort of like an underground railroad because it started on the railroad. And so speaking to that, it had become a safe haven. And so when it came time for the Emmett Till trial, Dr. Howard, who was very well known around the country, of course, opened up his home to Mamie Till. He had armed guards around his home to keep her safe, and then had armed guards taking her back and forth to the trial in Sumner. And so anyway, along with Mamie Till, you can see this in the movie. The people from Jet Magazine and the other black newspapers, and also the congressman and his staff and stuff, all came down. When they would come down, the only place they could stay was in Mount Bayou, and they stayed at T.R. Howard's house because he had a big ranch, and like I said, he had armed guards and stuff around his ranch, and to keep people safe. And so, and I want to tell one story about Mount Bayou, and I'll be finished. They did come to burn Mount Bayou down at one time. The Klan rode in, and the people in Mount Bayou found out before they got there. And so they prepped for them. They planted themselves on top of the rooftops of the buildings in Mount Bayou. And when the Klan rode in, they had also turned the street lights out. And when the Klan rode in, they had one guy perched on top of the bank building in town, which is a 2-story building. And this guy had a Gatling gun. I don't know if anybody knows what a Gatling gun is. It's like a machine gun. And when they rode in those horses, they let that Gatling gun go. And once those guys heard that Gatling gun, they turned tail and ran. And we never had a problem as far as that's concerned since. But it was very well protected because people were protective of the town that we had, and we had prosperity there. So just speaking to that, yeah.
That's beautiful. And I just often heard many stories about that, and I thought maybe it'd be interesting to ask that question. Any other questions? Here's one. Come on. You got a microphone?
Hey, I got the microphone.
Oh, okay.
So, thank you so much
okay.
for your
Come
presentations.
on.
I'm very happy to be here. My name is Tafara Walla Muhammad. And so my question, as someone that works with young people, I noticed that you said in order for people to come to the museum and to learn more, they needed to physically come there. And so my questions are related to technology. Are there plans or are there ways that younger people who might not be able to travel, is there a way for people to visit either your spaces virtually? And is there a plan for that? And I also acknowledge the fact that I too am currently living in the Delta where broadband internet is not available, but I'm trying to figure out how to engage younger people using virtual access.
The short answer, we're working on it. I gotta stress that we have had some success, but we started the museum out of a heartfelt need to do it, and we felt that what we had to do it whether or not we had help. And so we basically did this from our own resources. And yes, we are working on that, and we realize that that's important, especially with young people. There is and we have people who have chipped in and helped us out with the website. A lot of that stuff is people chipping in and helping us out. So we do have a website, like I said, mountbayumuseum.com. The rest of those things have been promised and are coming. We have other people who are saying that they realize that we need to do more, but we're doing what we can when we can.
We're just like Mount Bayou, poor as well, but we are working and have gotten to talking to Metaverse, the new Facebook, and asking them to assist us to make that happen. So we're hoping that we are able to make that happen. We're also involving our young folks as well to tell the story of Emmett Till to ensure that it never leaves us.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, I just wanted to know that how did Robert Johnson have 4 birthdays?
Well, Robert Johnson had 4 grave sites, and Sonny Boy had, and they was good friends, as I understand it. He either Sonny Boy poisoned Robert Johnson in whiskey because you couldn't get close to his whiskey, and I remember that in '65. I went and brought him a half a pint of whiskey, and he was looking for a fifth of whiskey, and he ran me and licked his knife and told me he'd cut my throat if I get close to it. But I understand that was because he had at some point poisoned Robert Johnson, or Robert Johnson died in his arm, and he found his grave site, why he probably had 4. The other story about Sonny Boy, he was so good with the harmonica until he stole a mule from the plantation and he painted it and he rode it to town on Saturday night, and it rained on it and washed the paint off him. But he was so good with the harmonica until they put him in prison over at Parchman, but they let him walk out of prison and go over into Helena, Arkansas, and get on the radio every day at 12:45, and they never went back and locked him up. So he was an escaped convict all his life as well. But that's Sonny Boy.
Can you make a distinction between the Sonny Boy Williams, because there was a name?
Sonny Boy Williams II.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of guys would take the names of other artists, you know, when they didn't know they were around, and use them to draw populations of people to their own concerts. And there had to be some distinctions made between some of the musicians who would do that. It was a real thing.
And we got to know too that Sonny Boy gave B.B. King his very first job. He had 2 jobs, and so he couldn't get to one of them, and he gave the other one to B.B. King, and that went on to make the king, I think. Yeah. So we're king makers as well out of Glendora.
Yeah, and this history is so interwoven into so much of other histories, past histories. The blues, we talk about blues men. They were the guys who were the itinerant people, and they could travel. And the law that replaced the legal side of what slavery was called being legal, when that was dismantled, they came up with another law called vagrancy, right? And so musicians had to find their way when those things by sheriffs, they would take them and lock them up and say you have to buy your way out of jail again. And if you couldn't do that, then you had to go back to the plantation. So a lot of those things were still going, and a lot of things are still kind of prevalent in terms of what's going on with that today. I'd like to say thank you to our panelists. If we can, let's give them a warm. Oh, you have a question? Okay, turn it back. Excuse me. Yeah, press the.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from Mr. Johnson from Mount Bowery. Yes, sir. I remember I was a freshman here at the time that Emmett Till trial was, and I attended the trial. Probably one of the only ones still living that attended that trial. And with Mrs. Till was a young congressman named from Charles Diggs from Detroit. And we were freshmen here, and we had these little beanies on, little green thing with 4 of us. And we pull those things off and put them in our back pockets because we didn't want anybody to know. And the reporters were out front like these guys are here, and the reporter said, I see Mrs. Till coming. And Mrs. Till walked up, and she said, they asked, are you Mamie? I said, yes, I'm Mamie. And said, who do it? He said, oh, by the way, I have with me Congressman Charles Diggs, all the way from Detroit. And the reporter replied, I didn't know we had any nigger congressmen. And then they started to question her about Emmett Till and what she was going to do, that exhumed, was she going to let the body be buried here and so forth. But they had on the stand the mortician who had dealt with the body as well. And we went in behind them, and I can't tell you all of the uproar. We went in and sat in, all 4 of us, at the back. They didn't have air conditioning, had these old big exhaust fans whirling around in there. But the person that I'd like to jump in my conclusion is that Medgar Evers was working for the insurance company in your town, and the guy from Greenwood was the one that killed him, because he found out when Medgar was investigating the Emmett Till case, he found out how to get to him, and he had a black man to drive him down to Jackson where they were having meetings at the time he killed Emmett Till. Biden Beckworth. I knew him because I worked at a store where he would come by all the time. So I just want to put that in, and I remember Dr. Tierran how great he was. That was the only place we could go to Mount Bayou Hospital or Yazoo City.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I'm David Jordan, State Senator, District 24, excuse me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You have a question? Any other questions? We like to we're going to change panelists, and I want to again thank you guys so much for sharing with us. And don't forget to take your salute there. Thank you. While we're making the transition, I'd like to have Sterling Plump, who's in the audience, come up. And if you will, take time to read the bios, because these people are not only fascinating speakers, but you see some of the histories behind who they are as well. We're I guess it's an unfortunate message that came from Cheryl Holly. He won't be able to attend. He says he's not feeling very well. And instead, I'm going to have Ms. Berneta Miles to come up, and she's going to serve on the panel with Sterling Plump. Yeah, Sterling is coming to us from the city of Chicago. I think he was a Clinton, Mississippi-born person, and you can ask questions about things concerning them as they come up. Berneta now lives in the Atlanta metropolitan area. She's I guess, Memphis, correct?
It's my second home. I'm from a little town. I'm originally from a little town called Humboldt, Tennessee.
Humboldt, Tennessee, okay.
Has been home for more than 50 years.
But I know you spent quite a bit of time there in that Memphis area as a musician. Before we get into the panel list, I'd like to bring to the microphone Senator David Jordan, who's going to share with us a history related to B.B. King and what the Senate did to recognize him as a state icon. Take your time, Senator. And most of these histories, they're very important. And if you are interested in these histories, which you should be, even some of the students there, try to make connections between what we're doing here in this symposium and what it means to you in your studies, because you're living in a very rich historical area in Mississippi Delta, number one, and sometimes you can be too busy not really knowing where you are and what it really stands for. So I'm encouraging you to do as much study and get background to some of those things as well. Senator, he's going to talk to us about Mr. B.B. King.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be here, and there's so much history made in the Mississippi Delta. As we know, long rows of cotton and scissors, he produced history, okay? That's where the Delta was noted for cotton. In 2004, I believe, B.B. King had set up shop here, and at the Presidednt home we were there, and I asked him, could he come to the state Senate? He said, I don't know, well, I can make it this year, but I'm coming next year if I have to walk. So I started corresponding with Las Vegas, and then February 15th, he showed up at the state capitol. And As he was coming in, the monitor was playing, the thrill is gone. And the whole Senate started rocking. Even we had the Lieutenant Governor of Arkansas, Haley Barbour was governor at that time. And he started walking. When he got up the podium, this is a photo, I got hundreds of them, different ones. He cried, standing between Johnny Wall, Senator Wall, and myself. I looked around, he was crying. And he said to us, see, I've been to 15 different heads of state across the country, across the world. But this is the first time I've been invited to the state capitol. And he shed tears. And I can still say today, after 30 years in the state Senate, that we have never had a crowd like that. Not even my classmate Morgan Freeman and Jim Brown. I had Jim Brown there. But we didn't get the crowd we got with B.B. King. And that was a glorious day. And then we had lunch with Haley Barbour, who was a Republican governor, but Haley was rocking that day. The whole Senate. And all the doctors and nurses were there to look after him. He was a diabetic, as many of you know. I just want to tell you how important and how significant it is to teach the next generation these things. I think when Joshua took them over biblically, and God moved his part of the Red Sea, he said, get some stone from the bottom of this sea, so that the next generation asks, what do these stones mean? You can tell them. So that's why we are significantly, we are important, because we can tell the history so the young people have something to warm their hearts by when winter nights grow cold. It's tough. But God is a just God. So B.B. King was the best. I don't care what you say. Whoever you put, Muddy Water, I heard all of them guys. I heard them all, because son of a sharecropper. But B.B. King and Lucille, finally, how did he get the name Lucille? That was his cousin, wife named Lucille. When he was a boy, he named it Lucille, that guitar. And we got a marker up out there on the road now that I had put up there, B.B. King. And tourists come to this university. I've had 3 sets that come from University of Iowa and different universities across the country. They want to see Valley State. And we eat there. So I'm going to get the president to put that little shandy, you're born right across the road over there in Berkeley. I want a shandy 3-room house. That's what we lived in. Put on this campus. And I want hors to be given away so that young students can see what a legend done in terms of music. Thank you, and may God bless you, and I answer any questions that you may have. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Hope I didn't lose too much of your time. But
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. Oh, wait, okay. This next panel will share personal stories related to the backdrop that they understand, in their lives as it relates to the blues and civil rights. We have with us an extraordinary poet and a wonderful musician in her own right. So let's give them a warm hand, Mr. Sterling Plump and Ms. Berneta Miles. Thank you.
Let me first say that one of the places that I will always remember is the Mississippi Delta, because I was born on the plantation in Clinton, maybe 30 families, in 1940, reared by my grandparent. And in order to get money to buy school clothing, Christmas, we would board a truck 3 o'clock in the morning and be at a cotton field in Chula by 6 o'clock. And the idea that you would get cash money that day was a big thing for my grandfather. And so when I got the opportunity to come to Mississippi Valley State 2015 or thereabout, I jumped at it. The other reason, the Mississippi Delta and the blues, and everyone has their idea about the blues. In fact, the greatest blues singers in the world could very well be Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, John Lee Hooker, all from Mississippi. But for me, when I was born, my grandfather was old school. He was born in 1880. My grandmother was born in 1890. And because my father did not marry my mother, in those old days, my grandfather said that he would take care of me. And actually, let my real father know that the most seldom he visit, the better it would be. But I grew up in this situation where the people who were born 1800s, religion was not, I don't want to say this, it was not hidden. There was a routine that happened twice a day. My grandfather would pray when he got up to the whole house. My grandmother would follow him. And it was not, when they were talking to God, it was not a speech, it was almost like a chant. Almost like when you were in revivals. And I heard that for 15 years. My uncles, mothers, uncles, and aunts would play music with the permission of my grandfather. He was the type that said that this is my house. You don't talk back to me in my house, ever. Whether you won or 50, you don't talk back to me in my house. He's a very strange man. We lived by a railroad track, and hobos would come by. My grandfather wouldn't call them hobos. He said they are tramps. They would want water, and they would attempt to come into the yard, and he said, no, you stand in the road, and I'll have the boy bring you some water out there. The same thing, if white people would come and attempt to come into the field while we was working, he would say, no, you stand in the road. A very strange man. But the most interesting thing about my grandparent, somewhere around the age of 11, they had a belief that I would become responsible for my soul when I was 12 years old. That was conveyed to me. And in order to transition from a non-believer into someone who had been saved, you know, these are new things to me. they had these things called revivals. I don't know whether they have or not. That is, they'll take you to the church sometime at dusk, and you would sit on the front row of the church, right? The first 3 pews, and they call them mourners bench, but they will be singing these songs over you. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Oh, here we come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. And my temptation was to say, I'm tired of sitting up here. I might as well say I want to belong to the church. But that was not the deal. The deal was that you could not be saved unless you had a conversionary experience with the Lord. That in fact, you had to have this experience, and that Christ had to give you a sign that you were saved. And it was singing. And the reason why I mention that, I don't want to mention the blues with religion. But everything that I heard these blues singers sing, I had heard in the church. I mean, the tone, the moan, I had heard it at funerals. It's almost as if the blues singer had an advanced language degree in church language. Now, why is this problematic with me? You know, I'm not a racist. My grandchildren's father is white. But one of the things that's very unsettling to me, and I don't know how to explain, it's almost like having pretzels for a full meal, and that is having non-African Americans sing the blues, you know what I mean? It doesn't do anything to me. Never did. You ever this praise to the Stephen Ray Butler? No. Somehow, when I heard black people singing in the church, it's almost that they cried the words. They didn't shout the words. They cried the words. I was in Chicago for 61 years. The first 20 years I was there were about 15 places you could go hear the blues every night. The last 40, these wealthy people had developed blues clubs where you could go hear it 7 nights a week. I mean, you could go close enough to touch Muddy Waters, a Howlin' Wolf. B.B. King is a different story. B.B. King is royalty. You had to put a suit on, I'm telling you, and you had to get up off of more than $3 or $4 to go to see him. He played the big name clubs. He played clubs that maybe Harry Belafonte, Sammy Davis Jr. would play. The thing about B.B. King that you might not know, he was more generous to the average black. Somewhere around 1964, he made a recording in the Cook County Prison, which is primarily black inmates. I was stopped there. One other fact, maybe that I should mention. I became a writer. That's yes, and I did not become a writer. I went to Catholic school, and the Catholic University offered me a scholarship. And I was the only black in the whole class. And I wanted to do like any smart black wanted to do, is I was sat in the back. And I had priests they could not be fired, and this priest would come and stand right in front of me and lecture to me. I was sitting in the back, you know, and I got tired of him sitting in the back, and then I started sitting right down front, and he would come and lecture to me every day about, you know, Greek history and all of that. To make a long story short, at some point, a white professor, a man by the name of Professor Newman, called me into his office and gave me a collection of short stories when I was a freshman and said, I think you would be interested in it. And it was a short story by James Baldwin called Sonny's Blues. And that's when it clicked in my mind that everything that I had seen and heard in the black community was the material for black literature. Literature, I don't care what anyone said to you at Valley anywhere, you don't become a published writer because you're good. You become a published writer because someone in the publishing industry who is powerful say, I think that I will publish you. I think that I will publish you. I went on to become a professor, and that's how you become a, you know, how do you become a professor? You have to be good, but that's not how you become a professor. You know, for 30 years, I was on this thing deciding who should get tenure. No, you need someone that will go to the wall fighting for you. And I would say something that I shouldn't say. There's a great writer from the state of Mississippi. Maybe you know Faulkner. Her name is Ellen Douglas. Anyone know her? Greenwood. I'm from Mississippi. And if you worked in the university, you know not to trust people. And one of the things they did when I was up for promotion to full professor, they sent my work to Ellen Douglas. See what this southern white woman said about this boy. and God bless her, she gave me a favorable review. She wrote a play about blues. Maybe she comes from a very prominent family, maybe Haxton, maybe she was Ellen Haxton before she became Ellen Douglas. I say all that to say that it's a thrill for me to come back to Mississippi, and the only thing that bothers me about the blues mockers, and I will tell you about, I will say one thing and shut up. What bothers me about the blues mockers, they say that the blues mockers should be on plantation. I disagree with that. I think they should find out where Muddy Waters and B.B. King went to church, and that's what the mockers should be. They didn't learn it on the plantation, they learned it on the church, what the black culture was. That's why they learned that sound. The other thing is, about a month ago, you know how you're minding your own business, and this genteel white woman from Clinton, Mississippi, it said, Mr. Plump, and I said, yes, ma'am. Say, I want you to set aside October the 27th at 10 a.m. So we are pleased to announce to you that we are unveiling a blues marker, and you will be on it. And finally, I need to recognize someone. You know how you don't recognize people? You know, and That's not my manners. 20 years ago, 21, you know, I don't know, I done got too old to remember. Dr. Zing, head of the English Department of Mississippi Valley, paid me the highest honor. He devoted a whole issue of Valley Voices to me, and a lot of prominent writers wrote articles in it. And I need to recognize, and he was here this morning, and I needed to say that in public. He comes from a culture, and I asked him, you know, how did you get here? And I don't want to talk about his life, but the thing that he said to me that was the most moving, he grew up in China during the revolution. Mao Zedong sent him to the countryside when he was 12, and he had to spend 7 years there. You know, people talk about hardships, you know, and he picked cotton, I think. It's a true story. But he's real, a scholarly, I mean, he has an ear of how you convert experiences into literature, and his magazine exhibits excellence and diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sterling. Any questions? We're trying to do this maybe since he's just finished speaking. Any questions for Sterling about what he's done? I was sitting there thinking about some of the connections, you know, after reading, you know, some of the poetry that you've done. Yes. Can you get a microphone too?
Mr. Plump, can you talk a little bit about the way that the Checkerboard Lounge in Chicago was taken over by the University of Chicago and moved, and so that the white kids would have a place to come and hear the blues?
Yes. There were about 3 iconic places that the major blues singers recorded for Chess Records. And there were lounges in what's known as Bronzeville, the original black community. So you had the Checkerboard Lounge, you had Teresa's, and you had Pepper's. Chicago is so big, with 3 different shifts. They had something known as Blue Monday. That is, they were a great musician would host a series of musicians who would come in and jam. I don't care whether it's Harvard University, any major university, if you do not understand the indigenous culture of the city, you know, the university has no business being there. You know, it ought not exist. You can't go to Rome and not know opera, you know what I mean? You know, and so that what was happening, these white kids was coming down, and you know how these good, innocent Christian people, they thought their sons and daughters might get harmed by going in their neighborhood. So they didn't want the neighborhood and the community, so they took the blues club out of the black community and put it in a pristine, gentrified Hyde Park. And you can predict what happened, right? Yeah, after about 7 or 8 years, it's gone. Black folks ain't got no club in the community, and the black man that went there ain't got no club at all. Mm-hmm. That happened. I mean, there's another story I need to tell you. See, when you're in Chicago, I was on the scene. Since I was a professor, I mean, it's a funny thing. This community, I mean, America is class conscious. And so I was a professor. The clubs in Chicago are owned by very, very rich people in gentrified areas. And so they found out I was a professor. One of my students became a major force in the blues. And I don't use the word lightly. I will doubt if anybody in the world can outplay him on a harmonica. His name is Billy Branch. No. And, so he was taking me to these clubs, and the way these people handled me is they said, you can come in free and we will only charge you $1 for a drink. You know, that's Chicago. You know, well, I come up in jail. Well, I grew up in a different. I grew up where the first educated people I saw were school teachers and their children. The first people I saw that spoke standard English were not white. They were school teachers and their children. You came into school, and after the bell rang, they not only told you how to learn, but they told you what manners were. I mean, it was a you know, the principal would sit at the table and correct our grammar, you know, that kind of thing. In Jackson, I don't know about in Enola, but in Jackson, the middle-class black people, I'm talking about the school teachers, the club owners, shop owners, they developed 2 college prep schools, Jackson State Preparatory School, and Tougaloo had one. And as you know, the first public high school in the state of Mississippi was in Jackson, and it was a Catholic school. And that's why I went. Doctors, dentists, professors' kid, priming you to go into the white world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. If you could provide a syllabus or a reading list for people that were studying the blues right now, what are 2 books that you would suggest people to read?
Let me give you 2 people, and let me give you the 2 scholars.
Well, besides your own.
Let me give you the 2 books, and let me give you the 2 scholars. And I hate to say it, but I'll tell the truth. There was a man, his name was James Baldwin. Do you know him? Baldwin was born in 1924 in Harlem. You know, washed dishes, went to school with prominent Jewish people. He says that a Jewish woman would come to his house every Sunday and take him to see Broadway plays. He became a writer, but that was not what and he was in, maybe he was exiled voluntarily in France, in Paris. He was black. But he had another issue, and I don't know, somehow, since he was unapologetically gay, that lifestyle, I just don't know what they go in the United States, but he found a haven, and he found himself in Paris, living his life trying to write a novel, and he couldn't write a novel. And then he goes to Switzerland. And he said, it was only when I listened to Bessie Smith that I learned what I must have sounded like when I was young. You know what I mean? I don't, you know, he said that I listened to Bessie Smith, and that triggered in his ear how he ought to sound when he started writing it down. The other writer, and then this is in Nobody Knows My Name, if you want to know it. It's that Nobody Knows My Name, and Go Tell It on the Mountain. The other writer is an odd man. He's very bright. He wrote Invisible Man. His name is Ralph Ellison. And Ellison, he says two things. I mean, you might find, the book is called Shadow and Act. Shadow and Act. Ellison says in some of the words that the Europeans enslaved the black man physically, but the black man enslaved the European culturally. Taught him how to eat, taught him how to sing, taught him how to dance. That's what Ellison says now. Now we come to the scholars. And here, you know, I hate to tell the truth, you know what I mean? I think the most eminent scholar on the blues, I got to know him, is William Ferris, Give My Poor Heart Ease. It's not that, his films are even better than the books. Wealthy, but not only wealthy, but superiorly educated. When I say superiorly, he went to the top undergraduate school, Davidson. He went to one of the top universities in the Big Ten, Northwestern, got a degree in folklore, anthropology at Penn. When he graduated from Penn, maybe he did his PhD dissertation on Son Thomas. That's what he did. You know what I mean? He's, you know, but the interesting thing about him, he was interested in this black phenomena. And you know what he did? He got a job like at Jackson State. Hell, and within a year he was run out of town. I don't know. Then he went from Jackson State, he went to Yale to teach in an African American studies program, the first black studies program at Yale. He went there. He's very wealthy. I named him, he's very wealthy. He's white. I mean, his father was a plantation owner. Very well educated. And so he took the same ideas that he always had. They funded him at the University of Mississippi, the Southern Studies. His book, Give My Poor Heart Ease. The other one, you will not know about him. He was, he's also from Mississippi. And what he did over the last 60 years, 50 maybe, he founded Living Blues magazine. I would not have any respect for him for that. He is steadfast. If you ain't black, you will never be on the cover of Living Blues magazine. No. Over the last 50 years, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, you name the African-American musician, he and his wife, Amy, interviewed them. And in scholarship, you know, they call that primary data, don't they? You know.
Speak back in the microphone.
The interesting thing, when I was up to university at one time, I shouldn't tell you all these things. I was talking to Bill Paris, and maybe we used to, you know, he called bourbon Old Ezra. You know, he got a name for it. And we were down there drinking some Old Ezra. And he said, you know, he said, you know, Living Blues is coming from the University of Mississippi. I said, how is it coming? He said, some friends of the university. And then he told me something. See, you have to ask these white people. B.B. King was up there. I said, well, how much does B.B. King cost? He said it only costs $100,000. And I looked at him, I said, well, Ole Miss is not Harvard. No, I talked, you have to talk to these people. He said, you know, I said, well, how did you do it? He said it wasn't that difficult. He said, what I did, I called 100 friends at the university. And within an hour, we had it done. I'm told, the other thing I should tell you, William Faulkner's house is called Rowan Oak. A group of developers got it, and they were going to build a condominium. And I understood that Bill Ferris got on the telephone, and within 1 hour, he bought the deed for it and gave it to the university. They're good at that kind of thing. No, they're good at that. You know, they support. I went to the University of Mississippi. I was invited to speak, and I got there at midnight. Got off the train with my daughter, and this white woman said, Mr. Plump, how are you going to pay? I looked at her. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, what you mean pay? Well, you know you're going to stay in the hotel. Do you have a credit card? I don't have credit cards. Well, I said, well, you need to talk to those white folks at the university. They didn't tell me nothing about paying. I went all the way off, and the next day we were eating. The next day we was eating, and they treated my daughter and I like we was in the zoo. And Bill Ferris come over there, say, hello, Sterling. You know what they say? Say, oh, you're Mr. Ferris's guest. I got my humanity because of that, man. You know, that's how they treat you. And that's a fact. Bill Ferris, Jim O'Neill, he doesn't have books. Look up Living Blues. Living Blues is at the University of Mississippi. You can go there and get it. The interesting thing about Jim O'Neill, he even interviewed Thomas A. Dorsey, the father of gospel music, the two best scholars on it. There's no doubt about it. Leroy Jones wrote a great book called Blues People. I thought that he was stronger on jazz than he was on blues, to be honest with you. There's another brother by the name of
you got to cut. You had two books you were supposed to talk about.
Huh?
You had two books you were supposed to tell them about. We up to 6. Sterling and I, we go way back, so we cool. That's good. Sterling, thank you so much. And we're going to have to move on to, well, we have a question, but make it short.
You may.
Well, you turn the microphone back off.
You missed James Baldwin. I didn't hear you to mention the book, one of his books. Tell me how long the train been gone. That's all.
Yeah, he did.
The book that I'm speaking of.
Get the microphone back.
Yeah. The two books. The books where Baldwin is talking about his life. One of them is called Nobody Knows My Name. The other one is called Notes of a Native Son. But the book that he was trying to write was his first novel, coming up in this evangelist household, dominating father. The book is called Go Tell It on the Mountain. Go Tell It on the Mountain, about this young boy being converted.
Okay.
Well, I just have one quick question. I just wanted you to repeat that date that the city of Clinton is supposed to be recognizing you. I'm actually a resident of Clinton, and I would definitely like to share that with all of my friends from Clinton. I'm proud to get a chance to.
Yeah, I repeat it. My daughter is my pre-out manager. I have a 45-year-old daughter. Let's see, it's October the 27th. It's 10:30 a.m. It's Northside Drive. They will unveil a Northside Drive. You're driving, I suppose, west. You pass Sumner Hill High School, less than a half mile. Northside Drive goes to the left. The Tenton Road goes to the right. And right in that fork, there will be a place where they will unveil it.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
I apologize.
No, no problem. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Sterling, and we'll get back to that, but let's give Mr. Plump a warm round of applause. Thank you so much. So much information, and this symposium is geared to be able to get this kind of information. It's being documented, and hopefully we'll have some future references to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing with the documentation. We'd like to turn the mic over to Ms. Berneta Miles, and you can tell us what's on your mind.
Okay, I see on here where the title he chose, which I happen to like, it's called The Power of Freedom Songs and Black Poetry. And I'm going to try to express that. I see a lot of students in here, and I'm happy that you are here. My journey began in a very small town called Humboldt, Tennessee, population probably about 9,500. At the time that I grew up, we were fortunate enough to have a minister, which I'm going to piggyback on some of the things that he says, by the name of Reverend J.T. Freeman, who was, as I would say, way ahead of his time. He was very prominent in working with I think they want to be called not the NAACP anymore, but the NAACP now. But he was, actually got that started. My father was very active in the civil rights movement in my small town. And I always say every small town in the 60s, I'd say from the mid-50s to the early, maybe 1970s, had a Little Rock Nine of some sort. So in Humboldt, I was part of the first group of individuals in 1965 who helped integrate the school system. At that time, we still had a white school, we still had a black school. From the first grade through the 9th grade, I attended an all-black high school called Stigall High School. From the fall of 1965 to 1968, I began a journey at the white high school called Humboldt High School. At that time, there were probably maybe 12 of us all together total at that high school. So when I look down here and I see the power of freedom songs, I grew up in Jim Crow. I know what Jim Crow looks like. I know what the segregated South looks like. As you can look at me, you know, my heritage is evident that by the color of my skin, slave master is somewhere in my DNA. I have done my DNA through one of the agencies, and yes, it was really funny. My brother shows up with more European DNA than he does African DNA. And mine is not too far behind. So when it comes to the power of freedom songs, like Mr. Scully? Song. I grew up in the country, small town. My mother was actually born in Nutbush, Tennessee. So my roots are very strong in that part of the country, Haywood County, Lauderdale County, Ripley, Tennessee, Brownsville, Tennessee. I remember going to the family home, as we called it, the home church. They may or may not have a musician there on Sunday, but one thing was sure, for a fact, we had music. we had songs. A lot of the songs that I grew up with, and some of the things that I'm going to say now are actually going to piggyback on me later on today, but they were the old spirituals, which told stories. Always remember, a song, I don't care what genre it is, it tells a story. So we grew up with, sometimes I feel like a motherless child. We did sing Old Freedom. We did sing Lord, I Want to Be a Christian. We did sing Go Down Moses. So they are all inherently ordained in me. So I grow up, at the age of 10, I am in a play in the 5th grade, and I hit the stage and I go, yep, this is what I want to do. I knew at the age of 10 that I wanted to be on the stage doing something. Now, mind you, I was already playing the piano. I had started playing the piano at the age of 5, which was another unique thing growing up in a small southern town. We had 3 black individuals in my hometown who taught piano. And when I say taught piano, did not teach, they taught you to play by ear, but they also knew European theory. So I was able at a very young age to get both sides of the music history. With that, I just developed a really, really strong love of the arts in general. There isn't a genre of music that I haven't listened to, probably. I can't think of any. Do I like them all? No. But again, it goes back to the power of a song. So growing up and attending an all-white high school, I always told my parents it was like opening up Pandora's box. You took me from a culture that sort of confined me because I was used to never questioning what my parents said. And you put me in an environment where the students were allowed to think and pretty much speak what was on their mind. So now I'm in two conflicting cultures. How do I express myself? How do I learn to make it through? Music became my haven. It became the tool that directed me on a path. It made me feel safe. It made me feel comfortable because I was able to hear other people express ideas and thoughts that were in my head, but I didn't know how to put them down. You know, people have always asked me, because I am a singer, "Ooh, don't you write?" I didn't really start attempting to write until probably the last 10 years of my life, because it did not come natural. I did not know how to write that down. So with the students that are here, if you don't have a journal, get one. I'm sorry that I waited so late in my life to understand what that was about. And I don't care what it is. It may be one of those days, and when I say a journal, when you're writing, write literally what's coming out of your mouth. And that doesn't mean you got to put a period or apostrophe or comma or semicolon. You don't have to put any of that down. Just let it flow. Just start writing. There have been days, I'll be honest with you, when I finally started journaling, I had so many cuss words in there, I didn't really know I knew how to cuss because I never verbally came out of my mouth, but they were in my head. So that's what journaling does. It allows you to express yourself when you can't express it any other way. That's the power of music. That's the power of lyrics. We shall overcome. It's sad to say, but in this time period, today, we're still singing that song with conviction because there's so many things we still have not overcome. So I would say to the students, those of you who are interested in writing, don't give up. Matter of fact, I'm going to read the lyrics to, and I guess that's why the Spirit told me to write these lyrics down. Part of my journey is that I've developed a long-time friendship with a young lady named Vaneese, that's V-A-N-E-E-S-E, Thomas. She is the youngest daughter of Rufus Thomas, the sister to Carla Thomas, and Marvell Thomas. I call her my sister from the other mother. We've had a friendship for some 40 plus years. She is a wonderful writer, and as I said today, lyrics, words, poetry, because really songs are poetry. You know that, don't you? Students, you know that, right? I know the adults who are here. But I hope the students understand that lyrics are poetry. So I'm going to plug this in for her. She has a new project out called Fight the Good Fight. And I'm going to read you part of the lyrics because it's so relevant to you now. And it's from the title song. It's called Fight the Good Fight. And it says, "It's time to fight the good fight. Keep breaking down the walls. Don't give up. Don't let it bring you down. Keep fighting the good fight. Keep coming around. Keep fighting the good fight. Keep coming around. Learning this life, it sure enough ain't been easy. One step forward, two the other way. But hearing your voice saying you can do it, let me know it's worth the price I pay." So I leave that to the students, to the next generation. Fight the good fight. And you can find more information on Ms. Thomas at vanesethomas.com.
Thank you. Thank you. If you, like I said, make sure you read these bios, and you want to do some follow-up study and research on who's been in your presence today. We have more things that we need to say, but and I want to ask you to tell. See, a lot of people sitting here. You mentioned those names. I would grant it. Maybe some of us know how the seeds of Rufus Thomas works, but tell us a little bit about Rufus Thomas and what that whole Memphis scene was like. And he was very, very instrumental in the civil rights in that time.
Yes. So actually, so was his wife, Lorraine. Matter of fact, there is a sign, there is a photo, you can probably find it on the internet. Mrs. Thomas was part of the march for I Am a Man in Memphis, Tennessee. You can find her with the poster in front of her. And you probably don't know this, but you've seen it on a bunch of documentaries, because I've kind of spotted it. And Vaneese was right there along with her occasionally, but they were very, very strong. Matter of fact, Miss Thomas made sure I paid my dues every year to be a member of the NAACP until she left this earth. So, yes, they were, you know, and those are the kind of people that you don't know, but they're working behind the scenes. You don't always have to be out front to get work done. Sometimes the most powerful work is done behind the scenes, the things behind the closed doors, where if you really want to set somebody out and call them face to face and tell them who they are, you can and you do. Because you want to be polite. You don't, when you're out in public, you don't want to do something to somebody else, and then when they turn around or somebody later does that to you, you want to go, ooh, why, you can't do that to me. But you did that to somebody else, so why are you dishing something out that you can't take back? Mm-hmm. So, but there are a lot of people. My entry into the Memphis blues scene came later in my career. I was actually a member of a white band from 1978 to about 1991. We had two female singers, myself and another white girl, and the band members were basically all white. We had a black bass player that would rotate out every now and then, but the band itself was a white band. I was the only black person in it. And we did a 500-mile radius, one-nighters. We did private parties, conventions, weddings, bar mitzvahs. We actually did a private party in North Little Rock, Arkansas, where the individual brought in the Four Tops as their entertainment. And our band was the house band. We've been the house band for the Temptations. Well, we had many names, but by the time I left the group, it was called Riverside Drive. We weren't a recording band, we were a cover band. But people knew us because we gave them good products, so we got called to do a lot of stuff. So somewhere around mid-'80s, which is about the time Carla Thomas moved back to Memphis. She'd been in LA for quite a while. She moved back to Memphis. And I eventually started doing a lot of background work for her, which led me to doing background for her father. And anytime Marvell got put together a Stax group, I generally went with the group as a background singer. So that allowed me to sing background for Otis Clay, Eddie Floyd, William Bell, Lil Milton. Because of Marvell, my daughters and I actually got to sing background for Michael McDonald. On the jazz scene, I was very good friends with the late James Williams, Mulgrew Miller. I'm still good friends with Donald Brown, who are jazz musicians. And so that's kind of my route and how I got where I am. And now I'm happily retired and do stuff when I want to do stuff.
That's good. Thank you so much. Any questions for Berneta? Yes.
This may be a question just in general, but if she can respond to it, I would appreciate it. You mentioned about the freedom of through songs, through poetry. One aspect that I was wondering about in terms of relating to this symposium and anything else when it comes to African American studies, how does the black press incorporate into the equation? I'm seeing here two young ladies that I know who are part of one of the oldest black newspapers in Mississippi, and as well I stand here as being a part of another one of the papers. How much of the black press has played into the equation of your studies, your experience, or what have you?
My personal opinion, especially for those who paved the way for me, the B.B. Kings, the Nina Simones, the Sarah Vaughns, the Ella Fitzgeralds, the Bessie Smiths. If there was no black media around, meaning back then there were no black anchors. All you had was the small black newspapers. Now, you know, there still is a Tri-State Defender in Memphis. So if we did not have those within our own culture who saw our potential, exposing us the best way they knew how at the time, whether that was through a flyer on a flag, on a pole,